Very warm welcome to you once again, guys. It's Kasim. I hope all is well. I hope this week has been treating you well. Um, I hope life is all right. It's interesting. I received some feedback. Many of you know I'm training to become a counselor, and I received some feedback recently from my supervisor. And one of the things my supervisor said, which I found really interesting, is um, you will be able to find your way through, Kasim, because at the core of who you are, you're a good person and you want the best for people. And I was reflecting on this, last night and this morning. I've been reflecting on this and thinking about, why does that even matter? Why did she say something like that? Why is it that she observed that and felt the need to say it to me? And as I've been reflecting on it, one of the things that I've been thinking about is that, a lot of people don't really want good things for people. I've come to realize this, it's quite odd and weird, but I never realized that there are a lot of us people who would rather other people did not succeed, who would rather other people did not get ahead, and we would rather that we went ahead. It's interesting. When I go to school sometimes, one of the things that I say to students is that there are two ways to have the biggest building in town. The first is to basically build it. You get the resources, you get the material, you save the money, you get the builders, and you actually build the biggest building in town. The second most easiest way to have the biggest building in town is to tear every other building down in the town. And what's ironic about this is that even if you don't have the biggest building in town, a lot of people's philosophy and mindset and attitude is, well, at least nobody else has the biggest building in town. By the way, let me reflect on that, because as I've been saying this, it's just come to my mind that I may seem somewhat a bit egotistical in that I'm speaking about myself. But I recognize that this is, and I'm talking from a point of view, a helicopter point of view, of looking at the feedback that I was given and recognizing that actually, as a person, I do want the best for a lot of people. And not everybody. There are some people who I don't want the best for. But I genuinely, as a whole, really, really, really want people to do well. I love it. It's interesting, because one of the things she was saying to me about is that I support a lot of people in our counseling group, and I want them. And a lot of people are sometimes in my counseling group, sometimes they go through difficulties, and sometimes they don't believe in themselves, and sometimes they don't believe that they're going to be adequate as psychotherapists, as counselors, being out there and helping people. And I always have to remind them, yes, you are. Like, you can do this, you can grow, you can develop, you can get better, you can acquire new skills, right? You can practice. You as a person, like, at the very beginning of where you started off, you can actually start there and progress. Of course, deliberate practice is required. You need the support of other people, etc., etc. But I'm always emphasizing to people that things can get better. Like, you can improve your life. Like, you can improve yourself. And I really, really, truly believe that. So one of the things, as I've already started off, but one of the things that I wanted to articulate to you, which is just something that I don't know, maybe you haven't really thought about this before, is I'm not talking about other people and what other people should do for you and how other people should be like, but I encourage you to look at yourself and look at whether you want the best for people. Do you want other people to succeed? Do you support other people? Are you people's cheerleader? Earlier on this morning, well, it's actually afternoon now. What's the time? So it's 3 o'clock. But this morning, I was listening to a YouTube video. Actually, it wasn't a YouTube video. It was a video which was on Instagram, I think it was. And a man was asking people at a college university or a university campus what their favorite thing about black people. And somebody said in their clip that one of the things that they love about black people is that black people are the best hype man. They're the best person to hype you up and get you going. And I guess, obviously, let's not just use this from being a black person's perspective, but from a human perspective. I wonder, as you reflect on yourself and you reflect on your life, whether you're the kind of person who wants the best for other people, whether you're a cheerleader for other people. Now, you may have the attitude and the philosophy and the mindset that, hold on a minute, Kasim, well, what about other people? Why can't they help me? What are other people? But nobody's cheerleading me on. But I'm not talking about that in this clip. And listen, I understand that there is a place for that, for people to cheer you on and to be the ones to encourage you. But I'm just talking from the point of view of me and you doing it. And I'm wondering how much of that you do, not necessarily when you feel like it, but when people need it. It's just something to reflect on, right? And I've already started off talking today, but it's just something that I wanted to think about. But just going back to the very beginning, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, which is really you see me talking to you freely. I'm not, obviously, I've made some rough ideas of what I want to talk about, but I'm kind of speaking to you free flow. This is my way of trying to think and articulate and reflect on myself and begin to develop some of my ideas and philosophies and get things out of my head so that I can begin to understand them. And so the thing that I would recommend to you, you can do whatever it is that you want. It's your life. Give me 1 second. The thing that I would recommend to you, and it's your life, you can do whatever you want, is to begin that journey for yourself. Begin that journey of reflecting, journaling, writing things down, making notes on your phone. If you have an iPhone, start to reflect and write down some of the things in your notes. What do you believe a man should be? What do you believe a woman should be? What is a man? What is a woman? What is success? What isn't success? What have you been reflecting on and thinking about this week? What lessons have you learned? What things have you learned worked and don't work? You know, it's actually interesting because, weirdly enough, one of the things that I wrote down here that I wanted to talk to you about this week is that, hold on a minute now, let me get it. Here's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. The teachings of the sinner are wiser than the naivety of the saint. I repeat, the teachings of the sinner are wiser than the naivety of the saint. A lot of us in life, and I'm generalizing because I'm not talking about everybody, and I myself can say that I definitely used to be a victim of this, and you can definitely say I used to be somebody who did this, which is that the only way that I wanted to learn about what I should do in life, what is okay, what isn't okay, is through personal experience. And what I've come to realize over time, as I've refined my philosophy, as I've observed my life, is that that isn't actually the only way to learn. We can actually, of course, we should learn from our own experiences, what works, what doesn't work, but we can also learn from other people. We can learn from other people's failures. Part of the reason, I was actually explaining this to somebody, I don't remember who it was, but I was explaining to someone recently that somebody basically said, oh, I remember, it was a woman in Sutton. I was in London in Sutton, and a woman was saying to me, about my story, and she said to me, how have you been able to make so much progress? How have you been able to grow as a person so quickly? And I was saying to her, it is not because I have lived a 10,000 lifetimes, or I've lived longer than everybody, or what I've gone through is more extreme than anybody. But what I said to her is that I've learned from people around me. And I was explaining to her one of the things that led me to this, which is that in the majority of the jobs that I have had in my life, from starting off working as a kitchen porter at the age of 14, pretty much all the jobs that I've had, have been around people who've been older than me. And as a result, I have heard the same things over and over and over again. And I've been looking at these patterns which just keep appearing over and over and over again. And because I've had 28 jobs, by the time you're listening to this, I've had 28 jobs in my life. Well, technically 29 if you count the volunteering jobs, but if we just stick to the normal jobs, I've had 28 jobs. And basically the same things turn up in every single job over and over and over and over and over again. And one of the things that has come up and over again is the amount of people who have earned more money, who have got the job that they want, and they're still not happy. Another theme that has come up is the amount of people who are trapped in a story, in a mindset, in a belief system, and that belief system, that mindset, and that narrative is holding them hostage, and they can't leave it. because it's really interesting. This topic is actually so interesting. It's really interesting because the thing about growing and developing as a human being is that in order to grow and to change and to develop, you have to let go of the established foundation that you've had. I said in my first book, The Best Kept Secret, one of the things that I talked about is that I said something to the effect of this. I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but I said that once you go from 0 to 10, and 10 is the highest level that you can go on a certain level, in order to progress and get to 20, you actually have to go back to 0. You have to go back to the numbers. The second set of numbers actually goes back down. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then to get to 20, you go to 11, you go to 12, you go to 13. In other words, what I was trying to articulate in this point and in this chapter of the book is that so many of us don't want to be seen to be starting small. We don't want to be seen to be beginners again. But if you look at life, particularly when it comes to transitions, particularly when it comes to growing, particularly when it comes to developing as people, you cannot do that unless you become a beginner again, right? Because at every level, you're always at the bottom. So if you've gone from being, I was explaining to, I was at a school this week, I think it was this week, and I was explaining to the students that, I was giving them this, it was a school this week actually, because I was in Kingston at a school, and I was explaining to the students that, look, many of you are going to be amazing at maths and you're going to be amazing at sports whilst you're in the school. But the only true way to determine how truly good you are and how truly competent you are is to go up against people who are as good as you. And I was using the example of Chelsea Football Club. And I was saying that, look, every single player who gets into the Chelsea Academy is good. You don't get to Chelsea Academy if you're average. You get there because you've either been scouted or you've been playing for a long time, and you are, to all intensive purposes, better than average, because most of the people you've been playing with either haven't been serious or they haven't been that good. And so when you get there, a lot of times you're not the best because everybody there is really, really, really good. And one of the things that I was really reflecting on and I was telling the students is, so if everybody who goes to Chelsea Academy is amazing and really good, how is it that they filter through and choose the players who end up, of course, becoming part of the 20-old players or 30-old players that get onto to become the over 21s football team? And a huge amount of it is that all to do with really the level. There's a certain mindset and a certain philosophy that I think a lot of players develop when they get into the academy, particularly around failure. So when things don't go the way that they want it, because look, if you've come from somewhere, let's say you've come from Kingston, and you've come from Kingston and you've been really, really good and you've been scouted to go for Chelsea, and when you were playing in Kingston, you were probably never tackled or you were an amazing goalkeeper. When you get to Chelsea, there are going to be players who are going to be able to score against you. There are going to be players who are going to be able to tackle you. And a lot of it comes down to, how do you deal with after you got tackled? How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with being scored against? And I've noticed that some people take that and they're like, okay, now I need to get better. Now I need to improve. In other words, they make it a challenge. They move to the next level. And the second thing is around the mindset of really continuing to progress and the level of seriousness that you take it. Because I think that there is a certain level of seriousness that is required to go from amateur to pro, around what you eat, how much you train, your mindset, what you expose yourself to, right? All of this sort of stuff individually isn't that big, but when you start to add it up, it compounds and makes an incredible human being, or in this particular example that we're using, an incredible footballer, right? Um, and so I think a huge amount of life and really looking at other people and trying to progress ourselves is looking at how serious are we? Are we continuing to grow? Are we continuing to learn? And are we prepared to go back to the beginning and learn from the beginning, but on the next level? Because if you want to go from amateur to pro, everything basically gets tweaked and refined. And I think that there is a lot of us who are coasting. And it's what I saw when I was working with people in all of my jobs. A lot of the people who are unhappy, a lot of the people who are not satisfied with their lives, what had happened is that they coasted. They'd rested on their laurels, I think is a phrase that is used. They'd stopped progressing. It's interesting because I was writing earlier on this morning, I wrote and I was saying that a lot of people forget that when you first begin off on doing something, particularly when you're playing a sport, going to the gym, anything, it could be anything, your progress will be really, 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 really high, and your learning arc will be really, really strong. But eventually what ends up happening is you kind of taper off, you stop, your progress or your learning curve stops being so steep. And a lot of us, once we kind of hit that plateau, what ends up happening is we don't then, what's the word I'm looking for? We then don't reinvent ourselves or reinvent our habits or reinvent our mindset or reinvent our philosophy to meet the next level. And I think a huge amount of people are unhappy, they're stuck in their lives, they're not doing well, not because they can't do it, but because as people, we haven't yet redefined and repositioned ourselves. And so I guess on this point, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, again, you know what I always say to you guys, it's your life, you can do whatever the hell you want. But what I would encourage you to do is to begin to look at, one, have you redefined yourself on the next level? What is your mindset, and have you updated your mindset? Are you basically using software which worked when you were a teenager to operate as an adult? Right? And secondly, are you learning from your life? And are you learning from other people? Because you do not need to live 10 years to figure out that spending more than you earn is not going to work out in the long run. Instead, you can study this stuff, you can read about it, right? And so I guess a huge amount of this is really around studying. How much studying are you actually doing? Like if we looked at your week and you had, let's say your week is 100%, how much of that 100% are you committing and dedicating to reviewing your week, to looking at what works, what doesn't work, to refining what you do so that you can get better as a person, so that your relationships can get better, so that your vitality can get better, so that your mental health can get better? If for the last 10 years you've really struggled with depression, the thing that you should now be getting at is observing and learning about, okay, what now no longer works? What does actually work for me? And have I implemented the things that work in my life so that they're consistent all the time? Right? And I'm using mental health and I'm using depression just as an example. That's not the totality of what I'm talking about. But my point being is, in the areas that matter to you, have you studied them? Have you studied your life? Have you studied other people who are on the same path as you? I don't know. It's just something that I wrote down that I thought might be interesting for you to also think about and reflect on. But anyways, we'll leave it there for now. The other thing that I wrote down here is actually, this is really interesting, is you cannot make someone love you by giving them more of what they don't appreciate. I repeat, you cannot make someone love you more by giving them more of what they don't appreciate. So this actually goes back and is linked to that what I've just shared with you just a moment ago, which is about reflecting and observing and paying attention to what is working, what isn't working. Because I think so many of us, we experience so much pain, so much heartache, we experience and go through so much struggle that is absolutely unnecessary. And I'm not saying there isn't an advantage to pain and struggle. Of course, there are advantages to pain and struggle. But what I'm saying is that there are we can go through unnecessary pain and unnecessary struggle. And it can actually make things worse for us in some cases. And so what I would share with you, and I would ask you to, again, reflect on, and is something that I myself have had to reflect on, is, do you know your boundaries? Do you know when to stop and when not to stop? If you've been giving and giving and giving to your friendships, expecting someone, your friends or your best friends, to be the ones who invite you out, to be the ones that pay when you go out for a meal, to be the ones that initiate a conversation, I don't know. And I'm not saying this is your life, and I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying for you to reflect on this. Is it perhaps time that you start to look at if these friendships are truly as fruitful and as productive as they can be? Let me tell you where this came from. This came from two places that I've been thinking about. Firstly, I've been thinking a lot about becoming a therapist. And when you become a therapist, I've been thinking about, at what point do you stop working with a client if you're not making progress with a client? Or do you just actually just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, even if things are not working? And the thing that I have learned is, at some point, you cannot keep having sessions with a client. People cannot be in therapy forever, right? You can't be in therapy forever. And the second thing that I've been thinking about related to this topic is around a friend of, basically, it's not a friend of mine. Basically, I was talking to someone on a dating app. And on the dating app that I was talking to this person, this person was taking a long time, like sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours to respond to the conversation that we were having. So I basically ended up unmatching from this person. And this person found me on social media, emailed me, and they asked me, why did you unfriend me and unmatch me? What happened? And I explained to this person that, look, I don't have time to be messing around in terms of people taking, 2 days, 24 hours to reply. In modern England, no one doesn't have access to their phone. And I understand, listen, I'm not stupid. I understand that people sometimes are busy. I understand that people sometimes are seeing family, etc. But I look for patterns. And if we're having a conversation over a 2-week period and the same patterns is happening, I just don't even bother and I cut it off, right? And I move on. And so, one of the things that I would encourage you to really think about is, are you giving more into and pouring more into something that isn't really fruitful, that is not really yielding you any results that are enough, right? Are you giving 80% into a relationship and the other person or a friendship, and the other person is giving 20%? And it's kind of like, what are you really getting out of it? In its totality, you're maybe getting 10% out of what you should be getting out of friendship. Now, this does, again, listen, you have to look at the nuance in this, because this doesn't mean that you cannot have friendships where you invest 100% into this one and you yield 100%, or you have 80% into this one and yield 10. I'm not saying that, because I get that. But what I'm saying is that I've noticed that so many of us, particularly men I'm talking to here, we have this propensity to invest much more into things that are not yielding the results that we would like, working overtime, right? We go to work and we're working an extra 3-4 hours every day, or even sometimes, if you add up over the week, we're clocking up sometimes 6-7 extra hours. And here's the thing, we're not being paid more for it, and it doesn't actually add to whether we're going to get a pay rise or not, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't give effort, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't give everything that you can. I'm just saying, have you reflected on that, the fact that sometimes you can give too much, that sometimes you can give over what is needed, and sometimes you can be pouring into something which doesn't even yield anything, and at some point you have to stop and move on and shift gear and shift direction and take that effort and pour it into something else. I'm not saying that this is true or isn't true. It's just something that I've been thinking about. Remember, this whole thing that I'm talking to you, this stuff about, is about reflecting on this stuff. There is no right or wrong answer. It's nuanced, right? It all depends on you, and it depends on your life, and it depends where you are in your, where you are at in your life, and it depends what you want and what you don't want. There's loads of things. So you have to take this stuff and tailor it to your life. But it's just something that I've been thinking about, and I just basically would encourage you to just reflect on that, right? Reflect on whether you are giving too much and it's not even being appreciated. I don't know. I could be wrong. And did you know what? Let me continue a little bit on this. I believe that it fucks with people's psyche when we give and give and give and give, and we don't get anything in return. Forget about the fact that it makes us resentment, vengeful, and all of that sort of stuff. I actually think it fucks with somebody's psyche, because it would make me feel like I'm not even worthy. I'm not even enough that this person is investing into me, that I'm getting a return on the investment that I'm putting in. And again, this doesn't mean that you have to always get a return on your investment. Some things you just give freely, irrelevant, without expecting anything. I get that. But I genuinely believe it fucks with you, it messes with your psyche when you are being abused or you're being taken advantage of, right? I don't know, I could be wrong. It's just something that I was thinking about. What else did I want to speak to you about? Oh, yes, this is very important now. I've been thinking about this, and this is what I wrote down. Don't wait for applause and approval. Break the status quo and become extraordinary. Oh, man, this is so deep. Oh, my goodness. I've been thinking a lot about this. I've met so many people, which is actually linked to the first thing that I was telling you about, being a cheerleader for other people. I have met so many people who they have so much capacity, so much potential, and yet they're waiting for permission. They're waiting for affirmation. They're waiting for somebody to give them the go-ahead. In my first book, I don't know why I'm talking a lot about my first book today, but I think it's all connected to this. In my first book, The Best Kept Secret, one of the things that I wrote down in that book is that all of us at some point have to get to a stage where we take ownership of our life, right? And when I was talking in that book, one of the things that I was saying is that, look, you can grow up with shitty parents. You can grow up in abuse, trauma. You can grow up being abandoned. You can grow up being abused. Absolutely. I get all of that, right? You may even grow up in a really amazing family with lots of resources, with lots of support, with grandparents, with friends, with church, with a mosque, with a community. You can have all of that. But at some point, let me go back a minute before I say that. And you are justified in complaining and victimizing yourself and having a victim mentality because of the way you're raised, or the conditions, or the foundation which was set for you based on your childhood, right? So, for example, if you grew up with very neglectful parents, you are justified in being pissed off because of the lasting damage that being neglected has done on your life. I don't agree. I don't disagree with that. I 100% agree with that. However, there's always, this is a small print now. This is the terms and conditions. However, in me saying that, there has to come a point there has to come a point in our lives where we say, okay, I know what my parents did, I know how I was brought up, I know what has happened, but you know what? In spite of all of that, let me see what I can do with what has been established, right? Let me see what I can do now. You know, in my head at the moment, as I'm saying all of this, what I'm thinking about is being given a second-hand car. It would be wonderful when you're learning to drive, be given a brand new car, and it would be fantastic. And when you've getting your first car, you've learned how to drive, it would be amazing if you can just go buy a brand new car. It has no dents, it has nothing on it. It's fantastic. Okay, but the reality of life is that most of us, when we're learning to drive, we get a beaten up old Ford Ka or Volkswagen Up, right? And there are other brands of cars, of course, available. I'm just using those because those were the ones that came off the top of my head. And at some point, we then have to take the car that we've been given and do the best that we can with it. Some of us might say, well, if my car is shit, then I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not going to drive it, I'm not going to do anything with it. Or you can take that car and modify it. You can take that car and still drive it. You know, it's interesting, you know. Most of us tend to think that if you are going to progress your life, you have to be whole. You have to be completely healed. But you know what? As I reflect on this right now, as we're talking, I don't really think anyone in their life, no matter how much damage has been done to you through trauma or the way that you were parented, I don't really truly believe that all of us can ever truly become brand new cars. I think that we all go through life with a deficiency. We go through life limping to some way. There is a dent here, there's a scratch there on the car. Obviously, I'm using the car as a metaphor to describe our life, right? We might have a dent here, we might make a loud noise here, and as we go through life, we just have to do the best that we can with the car that we've been given. And what I would persuade you and encourage you to do is to really look at whether you've been waiting to get a brand new car. I encourage you to start looking at whether you have been waiting to get permission, for people to affirm you, for people to say, go on, you're amazing, do it. Or actually, whether you've taken charge of your life, whether you've decided that in spite of everything that has happened, in spite of this and that, I love this and I don't love that, in spite of all the challenges that I've had, in spite of the fact that I don't have this and I don't have that, still, I'm going to start driving this car and I'm going to save money and do all that I can to start building this. A bit like, you remember earlier on, I was using that metaphor of how to have the biggest building in town, right? Some people would much rather tear down other people's buildings so that even if they don't have a building, then no one else does. Or some people, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, they don't have the support, but they begin. They're just like, do you know what? I'm going to save a little bit here. I'm going to start drawing the plans here. And what I encourage you to do is just begin to do that for yourself. Begin to dream for yourself. Begin to pursue your destiny and your potential. Just start heading in that direction. You don't have to have everything absolutely figured out and have all the answers and be absolutely perfect. I just say to you, start wherever you are. Start with what you've got and start aiming in the direction of your potential. So many of us in life forget that it's not what we get that makes us happy, it's who we become and what we're able to give because we become more. In other words, God, this is so cliche and so cringe, but it is about the journey, not the destination. It's who we're becoming. It's what we're able to grow and the relationships we're able to establish that makes life worthwhile, right? I said to you at the very beginning that one of the lessons that I'd learned from observing people in my 28 jobs is that so many people would achieve a certain level and they're still not happy, they're still not appeased, they're still not content. I've worked with people who told me They dreamt of being a manager and earning like 35 grand. Now, I know some of you listening to this, you're like, Kasim, 35 grand, that's nothing. But for some people, £35,000 is a huge amount of money. And they dreamt of earning that. And now they have. And they're still not happy. Right? And so this is why I encourage you to really look at your life. Look at, are you pursuing what you want? Like, I've read something, I can't remember where I read it, but it was saying that if you start running in the wrong direction, even if you're the fastest person, you will lose. What is that saying? There's something that goes something to the effect of, imagine living a life, climbing a ladder, and finding out that you had the ladder on the wrong wall. You climbed the wrong tree. You climbed the wrong mountain. Imagine that. And so a huge amount of what I'm trying to say to you in me, and I know I'm going on to this point and I'm blabbering on a bit too much about it, but I think it's so important, is, man, just decide what you want and just go after it, right? I was listening to someone yesterday, he was saying, people forget, you're gonna die. Like, I don't want to be like really depressing and somber and everything, but I'm sorry to tell you, everything that you value, that you think is so important, and you think you're going to be judged by people and people care, all of us are going to be dead in like 100 to 200 years. All the things that you're worried about, all the people you don't want to let down, all the people who you think are going to judge you, we're all going to be dead. It's going to mean nothing in the great scheme of this earth, right? And so, just think about that, right? You say, well, Kasim, I don't want to fail. It really doesn't matter. In the great scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. This is why I say it's about, and I'm not saying this quote is mine, by the way. This quote is actually, I took from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins says it's not what you get that makes us happy, it's who we become and what we're able to give because we become more, right? So in order to become more, you've got to just start heading towards that becoming more, whether that's an internal journey that you want to start or whether that's an external journey. For you, it might be moving out of your parents. For others, it might be dealing with the suicidal or the dark thoughts that we have in our head. But that's basically it. That's, I think, is where I'm going to finish this week, because I've given you a lot to really think about and to reflect on this week. But you know me, what I've always said to you, just start the journey, start journaling, start writing this stuff down, get it on paper. Writing isn't simply just writing. Writing is a process of actually thinking. As you take your journal and you start writing down and reflecting on what you want, what you don't want, where you're heading, where you're not heading, what you've learned, what you haven't learned, what works, what doesn't work, what your relationships are with other people, how you interact with people, how you show up, how you don't show up. As you begin to think about this stuff and journal about it, I'm telling you, the growth that you're going to have is unreal. We forget that a huge amount of the growth that we have as people is when we become aware. It's awareness. It's knowing how we show up. It's knowing what our failures are, what our mistakes are. It's knowing what we're at, right? They said that one of the most humbling things in life is your results. Actually looking at your life, how much money you have, looking at your bank account, how much savings you have, looking at your health, how much you weigh, looking at your vitality, how much do you feel healthy? Do you get tired all the time? You don't have to be a genius to figure this stuff out. You just have to look and observe yourself. And as you begin to look and observe yourself, you're going to find, that a huge amount of the relief and the progress that you make is just in the observation itself. Now, I could be wrong. And as I say, I always say to everybody, it's your life. There's a lot of nuance. I say all this stuff, but this doesn't necessarily mean that may be true for you. But what I'm trying to say is, just start looking at it. Try it out. You never know. You cannot say, I always say to students when I go to schools, you can't say that nobody supported you or nobody wants you to do good, because I'm here and I'm encouraging you and I'm saying to you that you can do great. And I say the same thing to you. So that's it. I will stop there. And thank you very much for listening. You know, all the usual stuff. I don't want to ask you to subscribe and all that sort of stuff. If you want to subscribe, fantastic. If you don't, that's fine with me. I do this regardless because I just find it really interesting to do this for myself. But really appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a really good week. Bye for now.